morning, everybody. It's wonderful to see you here with us this summer day. My name is Laurel Rapp. I'm the director of the U.S. and North America program here at Chatham House. And I'm really delighted to be having this conversation with Minister Joly today. And a warm welcome to all of you to where we are convening on big issues, and we have been for the past 100 years. And we're really delighted to continue that tradition with all of you today. Our conversation today is on Canada in a new economic era. And I think if we see the headlines over the past couple of days, we know we are very much in this new economic era. It also sometimes feels like an economic era of the past, because I did have to look up my American history books to understand the new tariffs coming from Washington, the Smoot-Hawley tariffs of the 1930s. And so there are moments of the past threaded into the present with kind of interesting questions about where we are headed in the future. And Canada is leading on so much of this work on industrial policy and what that modern industrial policy looks like for a major middle power leading on these questions that have really good lessons here in the UK to pull from. So Minister Joly is the Minister of Industry and Minister responsible for Canada Economic Development for the Quebec regions. She represents Haute-Saint-Cartierville, first elected in 2015. Previously, she was Minister of Foreign Affairs, Economic Development, Tourism, and Canadian Heritage, where she led Canada's response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, among many other files. Earlier, she founded the Vrai Changement pour Montréal party and ran for mayor in 2013. You also spent time in the UK, I understand, with a law degree from Oxford. And now you focus on industrial policy. And this is something that we have been unpacking a lot here in the UK as well, because this is a new policy that Canada is championing. Here in the UK, this is very salient across the European Union and in the United States as well. And so you have been looking at certain sectors: defense and aerospace, steel, critical minerals, energy, clean tech, and semiconductors. And I understand this is with an eye towards building greater economic resilience to current shocks and greater strategic autonomy. And so we're really eager to hear a bit about your vision, how Canada sees it, what lessons the UK and other middle powers can draw from this. So I will invite you to the podium for brief remarks. We will be in conversation for a little past the half hour, but we want to leave plenty of time for questions and comments from all of you here in the audience and online. So have your questions ready, and when I turn to you, we will have that conversation. We are on the record today. We are not under the Chatham House rule. Minister.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you. Merci pour tout. Ça me fait plaisir d'être ici. I'm really happy to be back in London. It's a city I got to know, and Laurel was referring to it as the former foreign minister. I used to be here quite a while, having served also along with 4 different foreign ministers from the UK: Liz Truss, James Cleverly, David Cameron, and David Lammy. And also, as you were mentioning, I'm a graduate from Oxford, Brasenose College. And imagine, at the time, yes, in 2003, the UK was part of the EU, and the EU was talking about creating its own constitution. And also, I will be forever grateful to the British people, because I'm a Chevening scholar, and I was able to get the chance to study abroad, a little girl from Francophone from Montreal. So thank you again. I'm here in the context of the Farnborough Air Show, which is an important air show, leading the Canadian aerospace delegation. And this is very much full circle for me. Why I say that is I was appointed Minister of Industry at a time of a trade war. And I used to work on the causes of the war as foreign minister, and now I'm working on the consequences of this trade war. So being in charge of the front lines, including the steel and aluminum sector, the auto sector, but also many other sectors, particularly with the recent tariffs. And so I come to the table with deep understanding of geopolitics, but also I was given a responsibility of protecting and creating also thousands of jobs in Canada at a time where we are also deeply integrated in the North American economy, and that we've had for too long a dependency on the US market. And so I take this duty of serving my country extremely seriously because so much is at stake. And the team and I are acting with urgency because we know time is of the essence, and government and industry right now are really working as one Team Canada. And so the aerospace sector is a perfect example. Canada has the 4th largest aerospace sector in the world. We have great homegrown Canadian companies, Bombardier, CAE, D'Havilland. We also have foreign companies that have very strong manufacturing industrial footprint in our country, including Bell Textron, Pratt & Whitney, and Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. And so many of these companies' history date back to the Second World War, when we started from scratch and created an aerospace sector to support, of course, Canadian soldiers, but also the British forces that were fighting. And many And so when I attended the Paris Air Show a year ago, it was shortly after I had been sworn in the new cabinet, and I said, we will rebuild the aerospace sector together. Et on va rebâtir le secteur de l'aérospatial, un secteur de l'aérospatial qui est beaucoup basé au Québec, mais aussi qui est basé partout à travers le pays. And so that had been, when I said that, that was just shortly after Prime Minister Carney had mentioned that we would be investing 2% of our GDP in defense within the year, so less than 12 months. And our aerospace sector had been developed mainly through civil and commercial markets and products rather than defense. And so that's why I was convinced that the aerospace sector could benefit from defense investments. And so the plan was to use our defense investments to re-empower our industrial base. And that's why we came up with our defense industrial strategy, our first defense industrial strategy since the Second World War, and our biggest industrial policy ever, with a budget of $500 billion. And so the goal of this strategy is to create 125,000 jobs. It is also to increase by 50% our exports. It is to develop, to control, to own our own IP, and to give 70% of procurement to Canadian companies. And so what have we done? We've been able to buy 6 new Bombardier aircrafts. We've landed a Bombardier Saab surveillance plane, which is called the Global Eye deal, to be manufactured in Canada. We said that we wanted more investments from Lockheed Martin for buying their F-35s. We also launched a conversation about building fighter jets in Canada through an potential investment by Saab in Gripens. We also landed more investments in L3 Harris and Airbus for their 330s. We also were able to conclude 150 new planes for A220, so Airbus commercial planes, and it's an order by AirAsia. So that was also good news. And yesterday alone, we had 2 important announcements, an investment of $250 million by Pratt & Whitney in expanding and modernizing their facility in Longueuil, Quebec, which is next to Montreal. Pratt & Whitney develops and produces and also assembles engines in Canada for the world in many aircrafts, may they be also commercial or defense. And also, very important, Laurel, we were also able to announce our participation to GCAP, which is building the 6th fighter jet generation, along with the UK, along with Japan, and along with Italy. And so, meanwhile, on the defense front, very important, within 8 months, we were able to conclude a very important bid on submarines, 12 new submarines for our Canadian Armed Forces and for our Navy, and the contract was awarded to TKMS. It's a consortium that is between Germany and Norway. It is the biggest procurement in our history, $80 billion Canadian, and many of the offsets for that submarine deal are also linked to the aerospace sector. We did that, everything that I've just described you, within a year. And so it shows that it's more than words. We're actually in action mode. And so that's why I say I come here in full circle. Because this is the perfect example of using defense investment as an economic stimulus at the time we're fighting a trade war. And that is why we know we can re-empower our manufacturing sector and also build Canada strong. And being in Farnborough with a very important, actually the biggest delegation in years of 500 people, shows our commitment to the aerospace sector, but our need to engage with the world as we're diversifying our markets. What I want to draw by that example about aerospace is industrial policy is back. It is inspired by choices of wise men and women that were working at a time that free trade was not as prevalent in the world. But let me be clear, we believe in free trade, and you know, the Prime Minister's Davos speech was clear about that too. We believe in creating a third way, which was highlighted in Davos, which would be, yes, working with the US, and yes, working with China, but fundamentally also being able, as a middle power, to draw our own path and being able, with sizable economies, to work together, to keep markets open, to attract capital, and to create jobs. And that speech gave hope to billions of people around the world that they could not only react to what is happening in the world, but fundamentally they could control their own destiny. And so at the same time, what we're seeing is that when countries are victims of tariffs, they have a tendency to close markets, particularly in affected sectors. And they develop industrial policies to protect jobs, protect plants, protect towns, protect livelihoods, protect industrial bases, but also a buzzword that is very, very real in Ottawa, protect sovereign capabilities. And so we can't let that happen. We need to make sure that when we sign a deal, we look at the other party in the eye and in the eyes, and we can actually shake hands and know that that deal will be followed through. And so we need to make sure that when trust is truly tested, friendship and interests hold. And so I've been engaging with many of my European counterparts about this, making sure that our deal will hold. I've been having conversations and many meetings with Stéphane Séjourné, who's my EU counterpart, Katharina Reich, who is the German, who's my German counterpart, Roland Lescure, my French counterpart, and looking forward to meeting my new UK counterpart. And as the EU was created through industrial cooperation between France and Germany on steel and coal, which led to the Schuman Accords, we know that we can do more industrial cooperation to make sure that we keep peace in this world, but also that we can benefit from shared prosperity, which was the case for Europe for decades. And so industrial policy is the new geopolitics. We've entered an era of geo-industrialization, where doing business together is no longer through only private markets. It is also very much through government-to-government decisions, where decisions are linked to geopolitical choices. And it is about reinforcing each other as countries, as nations, but also as private sector to private sector. And so Canada will lead this era with values of integrity, of trust, and about respect. And so my message to you all is let's work together and let's build shared prosperity through industrial policy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Minister. That was really useful to hear your progress over the past year, the specific industries you're looking at, and then some of the goals, right? Jobs, procurement, economic stimulus. Can you walk us through the why? The what has changed in the past 5 years, in the past 10 years, that has made Canada make a very strategic choice to bring much more investment into these strategic sectors?
Well, you know, if you look at the defense sector, of course, it started with the war in Ukraine, which led to eventually the weakening of the security architecture around the world. And eventually, with the war in the Middle East, tensions in Asia, we saw that bit by bit, the world was becoming a bit more fragmented. But it hadn't touched really fundamentally our economies per se. Of course, private markets are influenced by stability and are powered by peace. And that's how you're able to, like I was saying, ensure prosperity. But fundamentally what happened is the change in the vision of the US towards many of its countries, including its best allies in trade policy, led to a new era, like I was saying, of true industrial policy. And so when you think about defense, for example, then defense includes aerospace, includes auto, includes steel, includes aluminum, everything that the US wants to bring back even more to its country. Well, we know that we can make sure that we're doing not only it for us, but we can partner and do business with countries that are also investing in defense, as all investments are increasing, to make sure that we re-empower each other. And in the defense policy, Laurel, what is important, and we've developed 3 buzzwords. You know, politicians, we love buzzwords. So
And acronyms too.
And we're trying less.
I'm a former bureaucrat. We like the acronyms. You like the buzzwords. Yes.
So it's called, it's the build, partner, buy approach, where we will build in Canada. If we can't build it, then we will partner, yes, with another company, but fundamentally another country like Bombardier Saab, like the example I was referring to, or we will buy. And when we will buy, we'll make sure that, for example, TKMS, we're buying submarines from TKMS, from Germany. Well, we're working with TKMS, but we're working with Germany to see what can be bought from our own industrial base. Satellites, planes, AI, tech, etc.
So I want to get into the US, but let's first turn to the UK and Europe, because you are here today. You have done a lot of outreach across Europe. How do these countries fit into your industrial policy?
Well, becoming closer to Europe, particularly in industrial policy, is fundamental. We started conversation definitely on steel, aluminum.
Which has been a huge flashpoint with the US, of course.
Yes, which is affecting all of us. So because of 232 tariffs that are not necessarily covered by the different agreements that have been struck by Japan or Korea or the EU. So that's one thing. My colleague, the Minister of AI, has been also engaging a lot on AI. My colleague, Minister of Natural Resources, also on critical minerals. And I've been engaging also on the transformation of critical minerals and what can be done in Canada. But I think also Europe understands that Canada is a willing and trusted partner, not only on the security of Europe within NATO, particularly also dealing with the war in Ukraine, but also that we're an Arctic nation. We're very close to the Nordic 5. We know that we have to be able to protect our own sovereignty there, but fundamentally we can do that through industrial policy, aligning our private sectors, aligning our companies to be able to work together, to make investments in Europe, but also in Canada. So there's so much the government can do to make sure that, for example, if we put tariffs or if we're dealing with anti-dumping, with dumping of steel in our market, that we're not indirectly also hurting Europe or Japan, for example. So these are the things that we are very much working back in Ottawa about but we are also engaging with many countries.
And one of those countries you're engaging is China.
Yeah.
You were recently in Beijing. Mm-hmm. You have announced certain Canada-China EV electric vehicle arrangements and standards, and this has been a point of tension with Washington. How are you thinking about China's role in your industrial policy strategy? What are the sectors you are hoping very much to affirmatively develop? And then where are the places that you say we should not work in these sectors with China at this stage?
So we negotiated a deal with China, and the goal was to make it clear what we would engage on and what we would be basically protecting. And so I think when it comes to China, we've been able to clearly outline what is expected. And so that brings much more clarity and predictability, which we need and which the world needs. We cannot be just waking up to a new series of tariffs coming out.
For example?
For example. So it's on us, but on other countries also. The deal with China is, we had issues when it came to canola, seafood, etc. So agricultural products. And at the same time, we were able to agree on a hard cap quota of electric vehicles coming into Canada. Electric vehicles such as BYD or Chery that actually you see on the streets of London right now, that we don't see yet in North America, well, I must say in Canada. And the deal is clear. This year we'll be bringing 49,000 EVs to Canada in a market of 1.9 million cars. So very small percentage. The 49,000 that quota will be growing by 5% per year over 5 years to end up around 73,000. Now, in order to increase that amount of electric vehicles from China over that quota, Chinese companies need to abide by 4 conditions, which are all about fundamentally manufacturing in Canada. And so it must be through a joint venture with Canadian majority owned. It needs to be at the standards of labor standards of what is found in Canada. It needs also to really get its supply chains, the different companies' supply chains need to be made in Canada, so localization. And finally, the data security must be met in order for Canadians to be protected. So that is our approach right now. We've been working with 4 different companies yet. Chery, which is actually in Europe, and in the UK, retooling and taking possession of a former Nissan plant. Same in South Africa. We're working with BYD. We're working also with Geely, which owns Volvo, and also Shanghai Launch, which recently developed the Twingo for Renault. So these are the 4 companies that have approached us. Conversations are continuing, but that's how we're looking at our relationship with China and investments potentially in Canada.
That's helpful. So let's talk about the U.S. a bit. It is no secret that there is a new level of tension in this relationship. One of the most important defense partners of the U.S. major trading partner, one of the longest borders the U.S. has, right? So there is so much cultural connectivity, economic, defense ties. A lot of those are now under strain. They have been under strain the past 2 years, and they will be the following 2 years. But the choices Canada is making now will have long-term consequences for the relationship with the U.S. So how are you navigating? What are the goals you are trying to secure right now as you, other ministers, the Prime Minister, engage the United States in the short term, in the next 2 years? But then long term, what are the assumptions you're making about U.S. foreign policy over the next decade?
Well,
and we're very interested in this question here because it has implications for all countries about how they do longer term planning.
So when it comes to foreign policy, I'll let the foreign minister answer that question. But fundamentally, the Prime Minister has mentioned that it is a rupture. The U.S. has taken its own decision, which we need to respect, which is about being America first, which is about being able to attract more manufacturing and reshoring, and at the same time, being able...
Which Canada is doing as well in some ways.
In some ways. And at the same time, when it comes to the USMCA, the revision started July 1st. We knew that that was the deadline. Meanwhile, there were already violations of the USMCA because of the tariffs on steel, aluminum, and auto. And now with this series of new tariffs, the Prime Minister will engage with President Trump, and we are giving ourselves the time to see what can be done. And as he said, all options are on the table. And my job in the context of these negotiations, these talks, is to provide all the information, all the analysis of all the sectors that are impacted, and also so to the negotiation team, to engage with a variety of different U.S. influencers and decision makers. I was in Boston last week, meeting much more with the Democrats, but also I'll be heading to many different cities, Chicago, going to Texas, Florida in the next few weeks. So, and understanding also what's the position of different lawmakers within states, but also at the federal level. That for us is extremely important. And meanwhile, what we will value, of course, is predictability and being able to address the uncertainty, because what is affecting different investment decisions right now is the fact that the rules are always changing. That's true for Canada, but that's true for the world. That's true for the U.S. And so that's why where we think we can find a lot of predictability and certainty is working with our other allies and working and engaging with the UK. And that's why I'm here, engaging with Europe, going and signing trade deals around the world. We are now at 52 free trade agreements signed by Canada. Being able also just to diversify our markets. But now that that is signed, it is really making sure that our Canadian companies are working to go into these markets, to work with the Europeans even more, to integrate even them more with them, with the UK, with Asia. That's what we need to do. And meanwhile, on foreign direct investment, we need to be able to attract investment. The Prime Minister is holding an investor summit on September 14 and 15, and our goal is really to attract a lot of these investments. And I can go on and talk more about it, but Laurel, I'm convinced you have other questions.
But there's there's official government policy, but then that also has to be matched with the private sector, with industry, and not just Canadian private sector, European private, and some American private sector as well, right?
Yeah,
there's a role for many around the world to play in this project. One of the stakeholders in this project are Canada citizens.
Yeah.
And I'd be very eager to hear.
They're stakeholder, actually.
They're the stakeholders and the voters. How are you approaching this with Canadians? What is in it for them? How are you describing the value proposition? Because you're making hard trade-offs in funding too, right? If you're spending more on defense and critical minerals, either you grow your GDP and you make more money overall, you print more money overall or go into debt, or you cut something else. So how are you describing this to Canadians?
So our entire plan is about building Canada strong. And we think that we can have even more control on our economy, our own destiny, to protect jobs, but also to create jobs by unlocking the possibilities of our different industries. We've passed a major project bill to have one environmental evaluation, one permit. We're a federation, we have a tendency to have different layers and to go faster. We've been able to designate the different major projects which needs to be in the national interest, from developing and expanding our ports, Vancouver, Montreal, to opening new mining projects, lithium, graphite, to also more LNG, oil and gas, and at the same time, clean energy. We've been also able to invest even more in our Arctic by designated a highway that is so fundamentally important for the North that has been discussed for years but has not been built in 60 years, connecting the prairies also to the Arctic Ocean. So these are examples where we think that not only will we put people at work, but we can attract a lot of foreign capital. And that's why we are confident that we're able actually to bring Canadians along. Also, there's been a lot of internal barriers amongst provinces in Canada. And that is what is going on with the US is creating an impetus for them to collaborate and open their market. Yesterday, again, we were able, the provinces agreed that there would be no trade barriers amongst them on alcohol, which has been the case for nearly 150 years. So that's just an example of cooperation and unlocking the possibility of our economy. And then there's an entire foreign policy international agenda, which I was referring to, which is about, yes, diversifying our markets, free trade agreements, but also aligning our foreign policies, aligning our industrial policies.
So it's going to be a fun weekend in Canada with no tariff alcohol.
Please come in. We're also, we're investing in tourism.
Yes. Thank you so much for this, and I want to make sure we have plenty of time to come to the audience. So why don't we will pause there for now, and we will turn to the audience. And when you introduce yourself, please state your name, affiliation, and your question. Let's start here. And we'll have microphones coming your way.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for your insightful remarks. And actually, your cool-headed approach to economic diplomacy. My name is Ahmed Abdelatif, UCL. And your cool-headed approach to economic diplomacy, it restores faith in decent global policy dialogue. So thank you for that as well. So my question to you is, when it comes to designing industrial policy, what kind of frameworks you have in place in order to, one, make sure it does not discriminate against international and multilateral cooperation, because we know for sure that 80 to 90% of global industrial policy discriminate against foreign interests, and B, to make sure that it is outcome-oriented, whereby the government actually selects winners, not losers picking up the government. So thank you for that.
Thank you. So, yeah.
Let's take one more question from Creon.
Thanks very much. Korean Butler from Chatham House. It's a simple question. Are you worried about retaliation from the US against the kind of industrial strategies that you're developing? So you have a defense industrial strategy. I imagine there are going to be other sectors in the economy. And in particular, you're going to be saying to US companies in Canada, you're welcome here, but you're going to play by our rules. Now, we've seen in other areas, digital services, taxes, and so on, President Trump doesn't like this. So I just wonder, what your approach is going to be in those areas.
Well, I'll start by answering your question, and then I'll go to your question. I think we're clear-eyed, and we have to do it first and foremost for us. And we cannot be in a position of being scared or cornered. No, we have a plan, and we're sticking to it. We're putting it into place. That's the Canada Strong plan that I was referring to on major projects, that is defense spending, etc. And when it comes to defense, we're doing it for us, to protect our own sovereignty in a much more complicated and dangerous world, period. And because we had so much benefited from the peace dividend, following particularly the fall of the Berlin Wall, well, and Canada didn't invest as much in defense. And the High Commissioner here is our former Minister of Defense, and him and I worked a lot together, and we're very happy that we're investing now even more in defense, to be frank. Now, the definition of what is a Canadian company is one that we're looking very much into because, of course, it's Canadian owned, but also we're looking at those companies that have a very strong industrial footprint in Canada. And so Pratt & Whitney, for example, I was referring to, that has 6,500 people in Canada, is owned by RTX, which is an American company. But Pratt & Whitney is a Canadian company. It's celebrating its 95th anniversary in Canada this year, and we want to anchor the company for the next 95 years. It is so key. It develops the engines for the F-35s. It develops the engines for Airbus, for Boeing, for Bombardier, for Javelin, etc. So that's why a lot of actually American companies are interested in investing in Canada. And at Farnborough, that was absolutely clear. The conversation was about how can we invest even more in Canada? And so we have so many different proposals that are coming up. We're driving and attracting foreign direct investment. And we're offering stability, reliability, which has a value that has, a dollar value right now. And for the rest, what we need to do is to work even more with the EU, work with even more with certain other countries in Asia, as industrial powers need to make sure that, if we're dealing with the impacts of dump steel, for example, in our market, and we have now a tariff wall of 50% of our steel, which our steel plants were mainly focused on supporting the auto sector in the US, and that is not possible anymore because we just can't compete at a 50% tariff. Well, we need to be able to build the right type of steel in Canada for our infrastructure, for our defense sector, but also if our aluminum sector, which the US relies 75% of all the aluminum in the US comes from Canada, because aluminum is energy and bauxite. We have low-cost utilities, low-cost energy. Well, Europe needs our aluminum as well. So we've increased by more than 50% our exports towards Europe at a time where the defense investments are going up, the demand for aluminum is going up, and therefore we can open new markets. But we need to make sure that we have the same aluminum industrial policy with Europe, that basically they're not closing up their market to us, or they're not closing up their market to steel. And our steel is mainly now and going forward going to be done through electric arc furnace, basically having industrial carbon pricing aligned with Europe, green steel, green aluminum, and so we are aligning our industrial policies with Europe. So that's what I mean when I mean aligning our industrial policy. What will happen then? Further creation of steel and aluminum sectors between Europe and Canada.
And the winners losers question.
So, pardon?
And how you make sure that industrial policy does not discriminate against multilateral cooperation?
Yes, that's it. So I think that is the real concern, Because how can you keep evolving in a multilateralism framework at a time where so many bilateral agreements are signed, and so many exceptions are created to that multilateral framework? So that is why I think that you're going through either more bilateral agreements, government to government, or minilaterals. So a group of countries together. I think that, free trade is even more possible in certain sectors, particularly, I must say, energy at the time of an energy crisis, agricultural, food, etc. But when it comes to sectors that are very much influenced by national security considerations, including the manufacturing sector, those linked to defense, then I really think that industrialized powers are the ones that can be able to cooperate even more. And I think also that the problem we've had in Canada for too many years is we're very good in research. We have top-notch universities, like the UK. We are able to attract the world in terms of the best quality of students. We have the highest educated workforce in the world. But at the same time, we didn't always have the capital to commercialize our research. So AI was developed mainly, I must say, by great Canadian researchers out of the University of Toronto and Université de Montréal. Jeffrey Hinton and Joshua Benjo. But eventually that knowledge was developed even more in the US, or companies or startups have a tendency to be bought by American companies. We are working very hard to really be able also to scale these companies, and yes, to choose companies, and yes, to take risks, and yes, to invest in them and grow them. Cohere on the AI side is an example. We're one of the only countries in the world that have been able to develop an LLM model. So there's Anthropic, there's ChatGPT, but there's Cohere, the Canadian solution, which is not B2B, which is more B2C, which is not B2C, no, not directed to consumer, but is more business to business, B2B. And now we've just signed a deal with Germany to have major investments in Cohere to build a Canadian, but also German LLM. And we hope that we can have more countries on board. And that's the middle powers vision happening. And yes, we're choosing Cohere. And you know what? We're selling it through the Middle East. We were in Saudi Arabia proposing it, working also with the UAE, with Qatar, going around the world, trying to have more companies adopt it. And, we're proud of it, and we'll continue to do that. We just heard from Creon, I'll put in a plug for some recent research Creon has done on a new third pole for economic cooperation and rules, right? If the US, if China are breaking rules, trade norms, here is a new model that middle powers can cohere around. So read the report, it's very good. It's quite long, but it's very good. Mm-hmm. I will take the prerogative to ask one question online, and then we'll come back to the audience. You raise cheap energy. Mm-hmm. That's something Canada produces from renewables, but a lot of it is still from hydrocarbons. That is also a strategy many of the Canadian provinces have. We recently hosted the Premier of Alberta here. That is the policy of Alberta. There are questions about oil sands futures and the role of LNG. How is your industrial strategy going to be powered? You have to understand that Canada's energy landscape is very different. We have a huge country, and you have indeed much more oil and gas in the west and also in Newfoundland, but also more than 70% of our grid is clean because we have a lot of hydro. And we're also investing a lot in nuclear. We think we'll be able to build the first SMR project of the G7, and it's being built as we speak. And also, we've been able to develop the CANDU nuclear reactors that we sold to the world. And that is at the time where industrial policy was a real thing, that we decided to invest in homegrown technology and to really support a Canadian champion, which has now also UK ties. It's called Atkin Realis. In that sense, when you look at what's the rate in my home province of electricity rates for industrial consumption, it's between 3 to 5 cents a kilowatt. Okay, that's Canadian. And that's what is being pretty much the model for the aluminum sector. In Oklahoma, where President Trump has a project of an aluminum smelter, the lowest rate is around 13 to 14 cents a kilowatt American. So that would be
6, 7.
That would be around 18 cents a kilowatt. So the difference is huge. Massive. So you just can't compete. So that's also why we think we can attract more investments in the manufacturing sector through the cost of utilities being low. At the same time, we have now an electricity strategy because we need to increase our grid. Because like many countries, particularly also with the development of AI coming up and data centers needing a lot of energy, with the electrification of our transport, and we are not a jurisdiction that has a lot of EVs yet. We want more. We need charging stations, etc. We need to increase our electricity grid. And so that's why in the major projects vision, we are increasing that grid through energy projects. Now, when it comes to oil and gas, we think that we believe in LNG and exporting it. We think that particularly on the Asia side, we need to help our allies that are too dependent on Russian gas. And that's why we've been able to export from British Columbia for the first time some LNG to Korea and Japan that were in desperate need of it. We also think that we have a very important carbon capture project, which would be one of the biggest in the world. There was an agreement that was signed also to make sure that we would be reducing our carbon emissions, which is extremely important in these circumstances. But we saw what happened also with the Iran war, with the price of gas going up.
Still is up.
Yes, and we saw also the head of the International Energy Agency coming to Canada and saying, please help us, the world needs it. And so we will do that, and that's exactly what we're doing.
Great. So there's the shorter term plans and there's the longer term imperative.
Yes,
this
exactly.
is always the tension that exists in energy and climate policy. Others in the room, I'll take 3. And if there's a woman in the audience that has a question, I would love to call on a woman, please.
Thank you. I'm actually here visiting. I'm a regional minister in Sweden, from the west of Sweden. I wonder what you see the opportunities between both investing, but also the collaboration between Canada and Europe when it comes to the space industry and the space sector.
It's interesting you say that. Because
Do you mind if we take 2 more?
No, absolutely.
Okay. Here, and then
I'll make sure my answers are shorter.
Yeah, no, it's please, right here.
Hi, I'm Archie McCrath from the Clean Technology Partnership Initiative. A lot of other countries are also building sovereign capabilities while not being aligned with other countries. And at the same time, it's clear that not every trusted partner or middle power can onshore the whole supply chain themselves. We're working a lot with your own government, the France government, UK and the European Commission to try and get beyond what is a lot of high ambition and willingness to diversify and align into the really concrete transactions and investments that are needed to reduce reliance on particularly China in clean tech supply chains. You've obviously made a load of progress on domestic investment and your domestic industrial strategy, but when you're doing that with other countries, increasingly multilaterally with all other middle powers, that's a lot more difficult to make progress. So a question to you on how difficult are you finding it working with other middle powers, and what more can be done to move it from high ambition to concrete actions at the pace that is really needed?
Yeah, thank you.
One more question in the back here, sir. That's you.
Hi, Peter from New Capital Consensus. Canada's got the Maple 8, which the pension system is really good at investing domestically and in long-term assets. So I was just wondering what role you see them as playing, in supporting the investment priorities of the government, and also what the UK can learn from that, where our UK pension system isn't very long-term in its thinking, isn't able to invest as domestically as Canada's system.
Yeah.
So that's my question. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, 3 great questions. Thanks. So I'll start with the pension funds. I've been engaging a lot with the pension funds. Many Canadians would say that they're investing a lot across the world, including in the UK, and they want them to invest more in Canada. And I think there's a reckoning back home that they want to do this. This is a moment in our history where they need to do this. Of course, I come from a jurisdiction, a province where Caisse de dépôt, which is one of the pension funds, has a mandate to invest in the economy of my province of Quebec. So that form of economic nationalism through pension funds has been a real thing. And there's a social consensus about it. And so I'm working on also a venture cap strategy with some of them. We'll have more to say soon, but I'm convinced you'll see our Maple 8 playing a prevalent role at the Investor Summit that is coming up. They've invested in infrastructure, including at one point, Caisse was owning parts of the Heathrow Airport. We love the Heathrow Airport.
It's a good one. I agree.
It's a good one. It's a good one. We don't have necessarily these opportunities yet in Canada for this type of infrastructure investments, and we're working to also be able to offer some good investments possibilities to our Maple 8. So thank you for the question. We're very proud of our Maple 8. When it comes to Sweden and space and Europe, so I'm also in charge of space policy. We've been able to do an important investment to support our companies, working more with the European Space Agency, and we announced a $500 million investment a year ago, pretty much, to really be able to bring our Canadian companies to be integrated also with the European framework. At the same time, we're very proud of Artemis II. Jeremy Anson did a fantastic job working with NASA, and I think that brought back the spirit of enthusiasm towards space and its importance. At the same time, I must say we're taking into account the fact that the NASA model is completely changing, and there's a willingness also to be able to have more astronauts more often in space, with also a commercial model that is different. And so I'm working on a new space policy that I will be able to announce the next steps very soon. And I really think that there is a commercial opportunity with Europe. There is an industrial alignment. There's also obviously national security and security, just defense related investments that are super important. One of the things that also we will include in that approach is we want to be able to offer space launch capacity in Canada, which we don't have yet, but that we have a new Space Launch Act that went through Parliament, working with the Minister of Transport. And we've been approached by many European firms, including also the ESA, the European Space Agency, to work with us on that capacity. We have such a huge territory. It's possible. And we love Sweden, so looking forward to working more with Sweden as well. Yeah, that's it. We know that. We have a moment right now with the Saab deal, the Griffin conversation, etc. Good. Good luck with your elections coming as well. So when it comes to basically, I like how you presented a very high ambition, aspirational approach when it comes to climate policy versus an approach that is not pragmatic in an ironic way, but really making sure that clean tech happens. We're looking at the entire supply chain. So obviously clean tech is also influenced a lot by critical minerals. So we have many critical minerals projects. And defense investments are key to critical minerals because every time a government and within NATO is investing in critical minerals, that investment can be allocated to its defense spending and achievement of its 5% target. So for example, I'm working with Germany that has a 1.5 billion euros fund to invest in critical minerals, and they want to invest many of them in Canada. So that's an example, and the Prime Minister at the latest G7 announced 13 partnerships with 8 different countries. Now, my job is to help the transformation of these critical minerals. And so that is what these are the types of deal I'm trying to land. Some of them are defense related, but some of them also are not. But if we would, as a country, invest also in the transformation of these critical minerals, that would be allocated to our defense investment as well. So that's also what we're looking at, which is important. And then we have an example. I'll give you 2 examples. We have 2 battery plants that we were able to attract. One from which is called Nexstar, which is an LG, so Korean company investment. And we have a Volkswagen, it's called PowerCo investment. These investments were made at the time where, Laurel, you were part of the US administration under Biden, and it was the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act. And we were competing to get some of the investment in Canada. Now that framework is gone, and so we need to make sure that these battery plants continue to be profitable, but we think that long-term, they're really good investments, and that long-term, we can continue to create jobs, but also anchor key companies around these plants, and that also we work with them to, how can I say, modernize our auto sector, which in North America has not kept with the latest technology adoption that you're seeing across the world. And so we know that's where capital is going, so we will want to do that. The other project I can give you as an example is WinWest. We have a major project about windmills in Nova Scotia, so Atlantic coast. This would be a really important project and would bring a lot of possibility for Nova Scotia, which has been relying on coal for many years and needs to develop even its more electric grid. So we will attract foreign direct investments to be able to anchor even more WinWest in Atlantic Canada. And we think that can help the entire ecosystem of clean tech as well. So thank you.
I regret that we have reached the end of our hour together today, but you've given us so much food for thought on Canada's approach to industrial policy, and not just how Canada is navigating this moment, but how it's actually leading, offering ideas, offering lessons learned, best practices. And so we're really delighted to have you here today. Please join me in thanking the Minister.